Personalities of early and modern psycho-spirituality. At the end of the week, the pre-service teacher should be able to synthesize research-based knowledge to present some personalities in the field of early and modern psycho-spirituality.
William James. William James is famous for helping to found psychology as a formal discipline, for establishing the school of functionalism in psychology, and for greatly advancing the movement of pragmatism in philosophy. Si William James daw ay isang Amerikanong philosopher o pilosofo sa Tagalog. Siya ay mananalaysay at psikologo at ang unang tagapagturo na nag-aalok ng kursong psikolohiya sa Estados Unidos. Si James ay tinuturing na isang nangungunang palaisip noong huling bahagi ng ika-19 na siglo. Isa sa mga pinakamaimpluwensya ng pilosopo ng Estados Unidos at ang ama ng psikolohiyang Amerikano. His belief in the connection between mind and body led him to develop what has become known as the James Lange theory of emotion, which posits that human experience of emotion arises from psychological changes in response to external events. Si William James ay nagtanyag na sa pagtulong sa pagtatag ng psikolohiya bilang isang formal na disiplina para sa pagtatag ng paaralan na functionalism sa psikolohiya at para sa lubos na pagsulong ng paggalaw ng pragmatismo sa philosophy. Ang kanyang paniniwala ay koneksyon sa pagitan ng isip at katawan ay humantong sa kanya upang bumuo ng kung ano-anong naging kilala bilang James Lange theory ng emotion na naglalagay na ang karanasan ng tao sa emosyon ay nagmumula sa pagbabago ng physiological bilang tugon sa mga panlabas na kaganapan.
Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was a German philosopher. His contribution in psycho-spiritual development is he concerned with what he termed cell or soul, which seems to translate more the ancient Greek term psyche, and hence the mind-body relation. He says that if the soul and body are absolutely opposed to one another, as is maintained by the abstractive intellectual consciousness, Hegel comments then there is no possibility of any community between them. The community was, however, recognized by ancient metaphysics as an undeniable fact. Hegel describes spirit as sunk in nature, and it treats consciousness as largely limited to what now might be described as sentient or phenomenal consciousness along the feeling soul. Hegel highlights the word consciousness. Hegel clearly signals a difference in the way in which an actual physiological subject relates to his or her own body. The type of abstractive thinking found in psychology does not, of course, as unmythical images of metamorphosis, involve the mind leaving the body. Hegel simply tells us that our mind and our soul is interconnected with each other. Also, Hegel stated that God is absolute spirit and Christianity is the absolute religion.
Sigmund Freud is most famous for his psychoanalytic school of thought, but he also took a keen interest in religion. As an adult, Freud considered himself an atheist, but his Jewish background and upbringing and background played an important role in the development of his ideas. He even wrote several books focused on the topic of religion. Religion, Freud believed, was an expression of underlying psychological neurosis and distress. At various points in his writings, he suggested that religion was an attempt to control the Oedipal complex, as opposed to electrical complex. So how did Freud feel about religion? In some of his best-known writings, he suggested that it was an illusion, a form of neurosis, and even an attempt to gain control over the external world. In The Feature of an Illusion, Freud wrote that religion is comparable to a childhood neurosis. From the future of an illusion means our knowledge of the historical worth of certain religious doctrines increases our respect for them, but does not invalidate our proposal that they should cease to be put forward as the reason for the precept of civilization. Also, the word religion is comparable to a childhood neurosis, a means of giving structure to social groups, wish fulfillment, and infantile delusion, and attempt to control the outside world.
Carl Jung, 1875 to 1961. Carl Jung was an early 20th century psychotherapist and psychiatrist who created in the field of analytical psychology. He is widely considered one of the most important figures in the history of psychology. Jung was concerned with the interplay between conscious and unconscious forces. Conscious is all those things that we are aware of, including things that we know about ourselves and our surrounding. Unconscious consists of those things that are outside of conscious awareness, including many memories, thoughts, and urges of which we are not aware. Jung was proposed two kinds of unconscious. The first one is the personal unconscious or the shadow. The second one is the collective unconscious. The first one is the personal unconscious or the shadow. Ito yung mga bagay na gusto nating kalimutan. And the second one is the collective unconscious. Ito naman ay mga kaganapan sa ating buhay na i-share natin sa lahat. The collective unconscious refers to events that we all share by virtue of having a common heritage or humanity. Alfred Adler, an Austrian psychiatrist who parted ways with Freud. Adler emphasized the role of goals and motivation in his individual psychology. One of Adler's most famous ideas is that we try to compensate for inferiorities. Inferiority is that we feel that we're being so lower in ourselves. A lack of power often lies the root of feeling inferiority. One way that religion enters to his picture is through our belief in God, which are characteristic of tendency to strive the perfection and superiority. For example, in many religions, God is considered to be perfect and omnipotent, and commands people likewise to be perfect. If we too achieve perfection, we become one with God. By identifying with God in this way, we compensate for our imperfections and feelings of inferiority. So, Alfred Adler point of view is that we need to having belief in God. At sa pamamagitan nito ay hindi natin ma-feel ang inferiority sa ating sarili o kababaan.
Gordon Allport. Allport is best known for the concept that although adult motives develop from infantile drives, they become independent on them. Allport called his concept functional autonomy. His approach favored emphasis on the problems of the adult personality rather than on those of infantile emotions and experience. Si Allport ay pinakamahusay na kilala para sa konsepto na kahit ang mga motibo ng pang-adulto ay nabuo mula sa pagmamaneho ng mga bata, naging independent sila sa kanila. Tinawag ni Allport ang konseptong ito na functional autonomy. Ang kanyang diskarte ay pinaburan ang diin sa mga problema ng adultong personalidad sa halip na sa mga damdamin at karahasan ng bata. Si Gordon Allport ay isang pioneer psychologist na madalas na tinutukoy bilang isa sa mga tagapagtatag ng personality psychology. Allport's definition of social psychology ay ang agham na nag-aaral ng individual hanggat ang kanyang pag-ugali ay nagpapasigla sa ibang mga individual o mismo ay isang reaksyon sa kanilang pag-ugali na naglalarawan sa kamalayan ng isang individual.
Erik Erikson gave such a strong contribution that his work as well received by students of religion and spurred various secondary literature. Erickson's interest in the human life cycle always coexisted with his interest in religion and human values, because Erickson assigned attending virtues to each psychosocial stage of development. Erickson's understanding of the way in which individuals manage to acquire these virtues factored into his understanding of how social values are transformed and how leaders rise to prominence out of strenuous psychological conflict and struggle. In this sense, Erickson makes it very difficult to talk of human life cycle without also critically analyzing the role of religion in the stages of psychosocial development. Religion becomes a critical term of analysis in life cycle theory at each epigenetic stage, beginning with the first. Religion at its best is, for Erickson, a sense of basic trust, means the development of basic trust undergirds the acquisition of the first life cycle, virtue that at Erickson assigns that of hope.
The modern thinkers.
Allen Eric Virgin, born in Spokane, Washington, August 4, 1934, is a clinical psychologist known for his research on psychotherapy outcomes and on integrating psychotherapy and religion. His 1980 article on theistic values was groundbreaking in the field and elicited over 1,000 responses and requests for reprints, and including those from Carl Rogers and Albert Bandura. Virgin is also noted for his interchanges with probabilistic atheist Albert Ellis. Allen Virgin is noted for his 1980 paper, Psychotherapy and Religious Values, which is known as landmark in the scholarly acceptance that religious values do, in practice, influence psychotherapy. He received the Distinguished Professional Contribution to Knowledge Award from the American Psychological Association in 1989 and was cited as challenging psychological orthodoxy to emphasize the importance of values and religion in the therapy.
Ralph Wilbur Hood, Jr. is a professor of psychology at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. He is a former editor of the Journal for the Scientific Study of the Religion and the former co-editor of the Archive for the Psychology of Religion and the International Journal for the Psychology of Religion. Ralph Wilbur Hood, Jr. ay isang American psychologist. Siya ay nagsisilbi bilang Leroy A. Martin Distinguished Professor of Religious Studies sa University of Tennessee sa Chattanooga, kung saan siya ang dalubhasa sa psikolohiya ng relihiyon. He is past president of Division 36 of the American Psychological Association and the recipient of its William James Award. He has published several hundred articles and book chapters on the psychology of religion and has authored, co-authored, or edited 13 volumes or dealing with the psychology of religion. Si Hood ay pinangalan ng Fellow ng Division 36 ng American Psychological Association or APA noong 1980 at nagsilbi bilang presidente nito noong 1992. Siya ay ginawaran ng Member Award ng Division noong 1996. Natanggap din ni Hood ang William James Award mula sa APA o tinatawag na American Psychological Association noong 1995 para sa matagal at natatanging pananaliksik sa psikolohiya ng relihiyon. Siya ay pinangalan ng isang fellow ng Society for the Scientific Study of Religion noong 1994 at ginawad sa Society Distinguished Service Award noong taong 2000. Nakakaraan.
Kenneth I. Pergament is a professor of psychology of Bowling Green State University. He received his PhD from the University of Maryland in 1977. He currently studies various relationships between religion, psychological well-being, and stress, as well as other closely related subjects. He is also licensed in clinical psychology and has a private practice. Pergament defined religion as a process, a search for significance in ways related to the sacred. Pergament noted that the most critical function of religion is spiritual in nature. He further emphasized the spirituality as a critical dimension of life cannot and should be not explained away, and can be conceived as a higher dimension of human potential. According to Pergament and Raiya, religious coping methods are ways of understanding and dealing with negative life events that are related to sacred. Pergament emphasized that what religion may distinctively contribute to coping lies in that it uniquely addresses sacred matter. So according to Pergament and Raiya, ang mga reliyon ay sa paraan ng pag-unawa at pagharap ng negatibong mga pangyayari sa ating buhay na nag-uugnay sa sacred o sagrado.
Julian Jaynes. Jaynes asserts that consciousness did not arise far back in human evolution, but is a learned process based on metaphorical language. Prior to the development of consciousness, Jaynes argues humans operated under a previous mentality he called the bicameral, two-chambered of mind. Julian Jaynes, primarily in his book The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, proposed that religion is a remnant of a relatively recent time in human development. Prior to the advent of consciousness, Jaynes hypothesized that hallucinated verbal commands helped non-conscious early man to perform tasks promoting human survival. Starting about 10,000 BC, selective pressures favorable the hallucinated verbal commands for social control, and they came to be perceived as an external rather than internal voice commanding the person to take some action. These were hence often explained as originating from invisible gods, spirits, ancestors, and so on and so forth. Thank you po for listening and have a great day ahead.